What impacted me most in terms of my own attitude and behavior from what I heard from the event is definitely being more cognizant of kind of my stereotypes and biases. Again, when you hear about Ebola, you think that's the entire, continent of Africa, but the reality is that Africa is very large, and what was going on was a very localized central piece of it. So being much more mindful of how I perceive information that's representing Africa. That there was a presentation of kind of bird's eye perspective of what's going on in Africa, and the intersection between technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and talent. I was really impressed in terms of hearing about the kind of talent that is invested in Africa and the outpouring of talent that's there.
I was really excited about the examples of entrepreneurship. Jake Bright gave us some example of all these tech companies, all these tech startups that are being developed in Africa and Kenya and other countries. And this is really interesting. It's very interesting to know that there's somewhere to start. I'm particularly interested in technology, and to see that a lot of things are being done in this field is just another point to encourage me and to confirm that the future of Africa can actually be bright if the youth and if everyone accept to see things differently and to take the path of the change.
There was one of the speakers that used the idea of the bright continent instead of the dark continent. And when I was growing up, if you ever saw movies about Africa or something, it was mysterious and drums and tigers and the dark continent. But what we heard that night is the amount of technology that's going on, the development, the entrepreneurial spirit, and I thought that was really quite impressive. And to me, it was a real shift in how I have been thinking about Africa for a long time.
We obviously are in a global economy, and it's our responsibilities as being part of the globe to think about what I can do to further solid good thinking and also associations with sustainable growth, and also philanthropic thinking, and what can I do? What's my part?
The first thing I took away from the meeting was definitely the limitless amounts of opportunity there to look at it, even from innovation, technology, encouraging and promoting the talent that's there. The second piece that I took away is the need for greater awareness and greater discussion on just a day-to-day level in terms of having conversations about what it means. I think Dio had talked a lot about poverty porn, and how when you think of Africa, you think of poverty, you think of impoverishment, you think of what they don't have. But the reality is if you sit down and really talk about the kinds of amazing opportunities that are there and the things that they do have, there's a lot of potential. And then the third part is how accessible people that are doing work in Africa are to us, and how we all need to get involved in some capacity.
When I look back at the evening, the biggest thing I think that I took away from the event was that Africa has so much larger potential in terms of sustainable growth, and I also saw how many attitudes that I had that were a result of, pure propaganda. A very interesting, provocative thought came by through one of the speakers who coined the phrase poverty porn, which I thought was very, very thought-provoking, because the images that when you conjure up, when you think of Africa, you think of either rebels, or you think of Ebola, you think of a child being, swollen tummy and, dying of starvation. And I had not thought of Africa as being such the biggest continent for growth, and 20% growth year over year, and that was very, very interesting for me.
For me, it's going to be a change in my attitude when I think about Africa or even see an African person, which we're seeing a lot now. I mean, people come over here to study or whatever, and it just, for me to start thinking about Africa with high-rise buildings and high technology, and it's going to shape my attitude for sure. I think another thing that I walked away with was the variety of people who care about Africa. That certainly we hear about China coming into Africa and so forth, but you get people at various levels, from entrepreneurial, corporate people. I mean, SAP has a big presence there that we heard that night, to non-government agencies, to just boots on the ground, if you will. A lot of people are seeing potential in Africa, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, and so there's lots of development going on, and it's quite impressive.
My takeaway is to see Africa from a different perspective, to see that it's not only poverty, only war and all this. But Africa actually is a bright continent. It's not a dark continent. A lot of things are going on. You have entrepreneurship. You have the youth that is really involved in making things change, and things are happening. And I think all of this gives a lot of hope about the future of Africa as a bright continent.
Definitely get involved. There are a multitude of organizations out there that are doing amazing work, but personally, having worked with IRNA and worked with Asante and looking at the caliber of projects that they're doing, the Leadership Incubation Project in Africa is just amazing and phenomenal. And if you really want to make an impact, get involved, donate, or volunteer your time.
I think there are a lot of things to do. There are a lot of ways to invest. And when you take organizations like Asante Africa, they are doing a great job through education, because we're talking about change, but a lot of this has to go through educated people, educated youth. So I think that what Asante Africa is doing is just awesome. It's one of the ways to help. And another way could be in entrepreneurship. And I know that Asante Africa also has this leadership program when they want to help these young people to become entrepreneurs, to develop their leadership. So these kind of initiatives are really interesting. So if some people are interested in making a difference in Africa and in taking part in the change that is going on, I think this is a good way to go.
I think from anybody who has a little bit of an interest in Africa or the development of what's been called the third world countries, Asante Africa is a great way to get into it. It's local, it's privately run, it's very accessible. Erna Grass is an amazing CEO. And if you have some skills and you'd like to contribute to what she's doing in terms of education in Africa, I know she'd love to have your help, your expertise. And I think that all of us can get in sort of, if you will, on the ground floor as Africa develops, both educationally and in terms of industry and corporate power and even the economics of Africa. So there's a lot to be had there. The future looks very bright. So it's not the dark continent anymore. Remember, it's now the bright continent.
I recommend to get involved in terms of just the thought leadership, to broaden your own educational horizons and thinking of how you might have had your images of Africa like I have had, where it's poverty-stricken and Ebola-ridden, and understand that there's economy and money and commerce and business where it's can be a thriving community and various countries. One of the other things was that Africa is not a country. I mean, it's a continent filled with many countries that are rich in resources and there's a lot of opportunity to give our educational resources as well as, of course, money, etc. But look up Asante Africa. I think it's www.asanteafrica, and look under thought leadership. That's what I would recommend.